Agus tí bhchorde agus fáilte roisteach go dtí ciad Q&A na bliana fi and so Bitesize Irish. You're very welcome into the first Bitesize Irish live Q&A of 2023. It's a new year and we're going back to basics. New start for a lot of people this time of year, maybe learning a language for the first time. So tonight we're going to be inviting well, anybody really to submit any question they like, but no question is too simple, let's say. So don't be embarrassed. And no, most simple questions don't have simple answers anyway, so you'll keep us occupied. With me tonight is Bitesize Irish founder Eoin O'Connor. Fáilte wrote Eoin. Slán tú.
Good Ben. Time house. Let's go through it.
So a new year, Eoin. Is there anything new with Bitesize? Does Bitesize have any specific New Year's resolutions or directions?
Yeah, well, we're busy, aren't we? We had our team call earlier today, just a bit of behind the scenes, and there was the 5 of us on the call, and just stepping back a bit, watching the conversation happen, I was like, oh, there's a lot happening, a lot of ideas, a lot of decisions to take as well. A simple thing that people can check out on our website, Bitesize.Irish, is our Where to Start quiz. It's a new quiz, really quick and easy. It's just like 2 or 3 questions. If you're looking for a direction of where to go, we've got a couple of resources that are popular on our site, and it's really helping you to decide which of those might be best suitable to you. So on our site, Bitesize.Irish, and in the top is the Where to Start quiz. So really quick and easy to do. You could do it right now. So I'd recommend that. And more generally, we're looking at how to help learners who are learning Gaeilge through Bitesize Irish. There's several hundred of them at any given time, and people, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different experience, starting from the absolute beginners all the way up to people who are quite fluent as Grow members, and they're participating in the Bitesize public community. So on the Grow side of things, we're looking to develop more Bitesize bio scripts. So they're the conversational scripts. So you're not just like practicing and you have to come up with something. It's a happy medium. And Ben, you're one of the instructors with Siobhan, who run the Bitesize bio calls. And on the other end of things, we want to be sure that people who are beginning, I'd be a bit hesitant to say absolute beginners, because a lot of people who start with us have already been maybe using an app to learn some vocabulary every day. They really enjoy the Irish language. There's something from the heart. That's always what I find. So, but a lot of people don't even have the context of pronunciation, how pronunciation works when it's spoken or from the page, just for example. So it's helping those beginners feel maybe a little less of the overwhelm and feel more of the fun and connection with the culture. So Neil, our learning content developer, is working hard to massage, formulate that content so that it really does help people who are want to start from the start, with a sprinkling of Irish at the start, and get you into learning the Irish language. And I always go back in my mind to the idea of you can be a practitioner of Gaeilge. And that's where our Gaeilge Gach Lá motto comes from. So you could simply see yourself as a learner, or you can, no matter what level you're at, even if you're starting, make the language part of your everyday.
Yes, very nice. Fair play. So obviously anybody who is watching live at the moment is welcome to submit their comments and questions, and we'll keep an eye on that. That's on the YouTube channel. And again, if you're watching this back later on, feel free, if you have comments or questions, to put them down below, and we will keep an eye on it and get back to you sooner or later. Do our best to help you. And interesting there, you're mentioning pronunciations. This sort of live format is a very good one for asking those questions and getting instant feedback. So we welcome your questions. I might get started with the question that came in during the week from John. So John says, I need advice on prepositions, particularly in, that is ones that relate to the word in English. So in, son, isteach, and when to use which one. So here is a simple question with a rather long answer, John. Good one, thank you. So firstly, we'll look at I and in and so and son, and when you use those. I'm actually in the wrong place here, if you can just bear with me. Sorry about this, folks.
It does seem like a simple question.
Yeah, well, I just want my notes to keep me straight.
Yeah.
I want my notes to keep me straight because it's easy to wrap yourself up in these things. So, okay, so it is used when the article does not occur. So if we were to take the word bank, meaning bank, like a financial institution in Irish, that word bank or bank on its own can mean simply bank or a bank, but not the bank. When we put un before it, we have the bank, but without the article, it can mean simply bank or a bank. So we use it when referring to one of those things. So if I were to say Eoin is in the bank, if I were to say Eoin is in a bank, Eoin in Mount, we could say, using the I there. Now, I could say that Eoin is in the Bank of Ireland, Eoin in Mount na hÉireann. Now, you'll notice that we are referring to a specific bank there, but because it's not the, it's a different form of saying the, because we're using the hÉireann afterwards. So anyway, we're using I where you don't have the article, imanc, and in is used in the same way except when the noun begins with a vowel. So if we take office, ifig. So ifig can mean office or an office. And we would say tá Eoin in ifig. Eoin is in an office. That could be used to construct the sentence tá Eoin in ifig a phoist, where we're saying he's in the post office. So it is a specific office, but because we're putting the description after it, we're not using the article in this case. So I is used for nouns where the article does not come before them. So imanc, in ifig. Then so is used for nouns where the article does come before them. So if we were to use again the example of the bank, the article is going to disappear, but if I say tá Eoin sa bhanc, it means that Eoin is in the bank. I'll just put some of these up. And then for son, again, son is being used for for nouns where the article is present, but they're beginning with a vowel. So if we take the example of ifig again, ifig, the office, tá Eoin son ifig. Eoin is in the office in that case. So I hope that makes some sense. John? Of course, when we talk about being in these places, like, it doesn't need, if you're using it doesn't need to be a physical place. It could be a state. So you could say Eoin is in trouble. We would say Tá Eoin idrib load. He's not in the trouble, he's just in trouble. Tá Eoin idrib load. And then likewise, if we have a state which begins with the vowel, where the noun begins with a vowel, we would use in there. So Tá má fáilte ag dul in ulcus. My health is getting worse. We're using the in there before ulcus. And then I suppose an easy way to think of it is with countries. Many countries have un in the title. So we have Unspawn, we have Suspawn, we have Unísiltír Holland, Sun Ísiltír, where it's beginning with the vowel there. So I hope that clears things up for you a little bit. John, I don't have anything else to add to that. Again, there, some countries do not, the name does not begin with the vowel. So Éire, or some countries, the name does not have the article in it. So we would have Éireann, for instance, in Éireann, Merica, Imerica. So Éire starting with an E. So we have in starting with a vowel, and then Merica starting with a consonant. So we have I, Merica. So I hope that helps. And just generally, something that I found earlier today is the site Leiglat. And on Leiglat, if you follow this here, we have Leiglat lessons. If you go to lesson Révocal 1 and 2, although it's designed for children, it's a very good tool for learning. You have a little picture of maybe, a pencil in a bucket. It'll ask you, where is the pencil? You click on it. On Pian Louis Suffocated. So there are different pictures, different contexts for different prepositions. And then, of course, we were talking about, in your question, you ask about isteach. So isteach relates to going in to somewhere. So hiúil sé isteach an doras, chuig sé isteach sa tig. He walked in the door. He went into the house. So isteach relates to the going in. Chuir mé an chluch isteach sa bhucéad. I put the stone into the bucket. Once I had done that, if you were to ask me, where is the stone? Tá an chluch isteach sa bhucéad. So isteach is the going in, amach is the going out, and then the position that the object is in, where it is in relation to the thing it's inside, is isteach or a mo. So isteach sa bhucéad, a mo is outside. Las mo can be used too, but las mo is more referring to something being outside of something else that's specified. That's more than tach, outside of the house, but just a mo is just outside. So I hope that helps you with your is and your ins and your sut and sons. John, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
There was a lot to answer, wasn't there? From something that seems very simple. Yeah, I'd see isteach, the way I think about it in my head, is directional, right? Mm-hmm. Is how I'd label it for myself. So I don't know, maybe that might help somebody. There's a direction to it. I think your point on the countries was very interesting, because someone can look at a list of countries in the Irish language written out, and then you can practice, say, is there on at the beginning, at the start of the country's name, and then make sample sentences for yourself, write them out. Tá mé America, no tá mé San Idail. So you get a lot of different contexts there. So that's a good one. And I just wanted to say about the just pronunciation as well. Like how I pronounce sa is more open or something. Yours is softer, a little softer. So I say sa, you say so, and just depending on who's watching this, you might be confused already. But the pronunciation varies, and that's how it is. So I wanted to make that point as well. Yeah, mahu ben.
Indeed, if you go to different parts of the country, you'll have a shti rather than a stig. Just as an example of something that we covered there. Yeah, very good. And then just, John, in terms of, getting used to those prepositions, really, if you're paying attention, any sort of reading that you do or any sort of listening that you do will help you simply to encounter examples of when things are used. So if you just maybe concentrate on that thing, maybe if you want to just concentrate on that element of the language for a week, and whether you be reading, listening to the radio, or if you even get the opportunity to talk to people, try and pay attention to what's going on there. And then, of course, this Goschaint is another site where you will find free reading material. And again, these are phrases that have been written in fairness in the different dialects, which is very useful for parents to use with their children, so that they're using idiomatic phrases when communicating with their kids and passing on the proper sort of syntax and vocabulary. So you will find it's hard to avoid these prepositions once you start to look at these little phrases that are on that site. So that's a nice way to do it as well. So I have a question for you here, Eoin, not one that I can answer, so throw it up there. It's from Molly. And Molly says, thank you, Molly, is it possible that you will have an app at some point?
Well,
anything is possible.
Everything is possible. So yeah, thanks a lot, Molly. So yeah, we don't have an app for Android or iOS, and reasons it's really expensive. It really comes down to that. Like, I've investigated, and it can, cost a lot of money. I think we can find a happy midpoint, but I do want to understand, or say that I hear you, Molly. Like, it'd be nice to be able to open up a Bitesize Irish app and open one of our lessons and take that, listen to the audio recordings, take the interactive quizzes, and do all that in an app directly. And I get you. Absolutely. That being said, like, there's things we're good at and there's things that we're not so good at, and we want to, I guess, work on the stuff that we're good at to make that really good. So in our learning platform Ashter, where we have our courses for members, for example, there's thousands of recordings, there's loads of quizzes, and there's newly written lessons, and they do work on the phone. You have to go through the web browser, so through Chrome, for example. So I actually checked the stats as well, Ben, and about over 55% of people using our learning platform Ashter are on their phones. So it goes to show that people are learning on their phones on Ashter, our learning platform. So it's a thing of constraints. Do we invest in an app and then not be able to concentrate on, for example, creating new content, recording new audio, creating new quizzes? So that's the question. Because we are a small company as well, small business, and I think we do so much for the small team that we have. Thank God that we have the passionate team, including Ben, working at Bitesize Irish. I feel very privileged to work with the people I work with in Bitesize Irish. So Molly, I'm kind of talking around, but the answer is no, we don't have an app. And then I do understand you do want to, of course, learn through your phone, and you can do that, but it's through the browser rather than directly through an app. And I've explained why. If I could jump from that, then there was a funny question in the chat here.
I see it there. People getting a bit agitated. Here we go. Yeah.
So I don't know the answer to this question. I know Sútalún is a strawberry, and literally, like a Sú would be like a berry, right? It's the same word for juice.
Mm.
And Talamh is the ground, so a ground berry, I think, would be a literal translation. But what about the Sú of a Sútalún?
I think Sútalún, I would say. Yeah. I've always thought of Sútalún as the sort of juice of the earth myself. But
yeah.
But yeah, Sútalún. Yeah. I would say
Sútalún. Or as they say in Connemara, the strawberry juice. Two of them on strawberry juice.
Two of them strawberry juice agus make drive all Gadeen cinema.
Yeah. Make drive on their bicycle.
No.
Yeah.
Mocking is catching. But yeah, I think Sútalún. I can't see any way out of it, really.
So there's other Sú, of course, like Súúl.
There are other kinds of Sú,
of course.
Yeah.
For some more vocab, Súarashta.
Anava. So Gurmagat son Eoin. Nice one. I'll return to some of the questions that came in earlier during the week. Now this one is from Tom. And Tom says, what's the best way to learn eclipses and lenition? And Gurmaga, Tom, this is actually something that Neil and I covered in our last Q&A. So I will address your question, but I also want to share just a link so that you can find the one that we did in December. So this is it here. So it's initial mutations, which is a catch-all term for eclipses, lenition, séimhiú, gazaru, and some other ones as well. And then if you go to the blog post, we have show notes for that particular Q&A as well, so that will help you. But essentially, one way that you can do it, well, the best way really, I think, is to expose yourself to as much Irish in as many different ways as often as you can, both reading and listening, and that way you'll automatically get acquainted with these changes. There probably isn't a better way, but there are many different instances in which séimhiú and uru can occur, and in order to learn, internalize, and use all of them, you're looking at learning an awful lot of grammatical rules, which can be overwhelming. So if you want to take that approach, learning grammatical rules is a good approach, but it's good to do it in a blended way. So try and incorporate it into your reading, listening, and conversing. And so if you were to do that, some advice that Neil had, which I think is valuable, is to try and concentrate on one element of it at a time. So if you want to say, take the possessive adjectives, which would be my, your, his, ours, etc. Look at the way that the noun changes after you use those possessive adjectives. And then for the next week or two, look out for them. in whatever way you're encountering Irish, whether it be the radio or talking to people or reading a book or whatever online content you like to use. And just pay attention to that, because it may be too much to try and learn all of these different instances of eclipses and séimhiú or lenition at once. So do that, concentrate on it for a couple of weeks, maybe go back to your grammar book then and refresh it, spend another couple of days on it, and you may be quite happy with the progress that you've made, and then you can look at another instance where it occurs, maybe depending on various different things. And so just approach it on a sort of case-by-case basis with the various different types of places or reasons it occurs. So that's my tuppence worth. Anything to add to that, Eoin?
Yeah, it's a toughie. I don't have any magical answer about that. So yeah, I'd defer to you and Neil on how to pick up the rules. As like a devil's advocate kind of position, I like my 7-year-old speaks Irish, but maybe I don't realize it, but he doesn't have much séimhiú and uru in places that I'd expect them. But he still makes himself known, you know, and he still speaks Irish. So I'm not advocating for incorrect Irish. I'm saying that you can learn step by step and level by level. And I guess I'm thinking back to the time I was learning French, and I'd get stuck at the very beginning of a sentence, basically, should I say le or la? And you know, you can't avoid it. You know, you have to have the correct one, or you should have the correct one. And the meaning of a sentence can change, say in Irish with the séimhiú and the uru. If you don't use the séimhiú, the lenition, you might not be understood, because what you're saying means something different, slightly. So, taking kind of a adaptive approach, a softly approach, that's always my approach or my advice, that yeah, you won't get it right in all the places, and of course, where do you start, kind of chicken and egg. But if you're interested in learning to express yourself in Irish, you do want to make yourself familiar with these rules, and they're there for a reason, right? Like it's not like somebody just invented these ideas. They convey meaning. They help understand what somebody is saying. So looking at it like that, the language isn't out to get you. There is a reason that they're there, even if it's simply to make a word easier to say, because of some preceding word that came before it. So that makes sense. And that, to me, that does make sense. It's like, okay, that's why the language formed like this. It's to be able to roll together words. And yeah, that makes complete sense. So coming from that perspective, so I'm just offering my perspective rather than any magical answer on how to learn it. It takes time.
Indeed, yeah. So sometimes it makes things easier to say, and sometimes it contains information as well. But generally, there's a reason that it's there. Yeah, we're not just being fuddy-duddies. Yeah. So another question here from James came in during the week from Margaret James. Look at this. So James says, one word that gives me trouble is to, as in what to use in Irish, where you would use the word to in English. So when do I use go? When do I use goodie? And when do I use chuig? So two answers again to this question. First, we'll look at Gudi and chuig. Now, as a Munster man, I don't really use chuig. It's not really used in Munster. There is, you would use chuig if you were to say it would be chuige. It would be to throw the ball to him. So an líróid a chahabh chuige to him. And some people say that that's where the chuig came from, that it came back from that. I don't know if that's true or not, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but I think the general convention is that chuig is preferred when you're talking about going to an event, something that's taking place in a place rather than to that place. So ag dul chuig ceolchoirm, for instance, going to a concert, or ag dul chuig cluiche. So the game is taking place at a playing field or a pitch, but you're going to the game, ag dul chuig cluiche. So this is, I understand the convention. It's not something that ever really occurred to me because we don't use the word chuig where I'm from in that context. And then when we're talking about go and gudi, that's when you're talking about going to an actual place. So if we're going to Spain, we're using gudi because the article is before Spain. So ag dul gudi on Spáin. Then go will be used in a case where the article is not present. So sasna, for instance, ag dul go sasna. Ag dul gudi on Spáin, ag dul go Kirkig. Of course, we also have chun, which is an option that you can use in the place of go as well. Well, chun will only be used, well, let's say using with on Spáin, you can use it and it means exactly the same as ag dul gudi on Spáin, but when you use chun, you must remember to change the noun to the genitive or the genitive. So ag dul chun na Spáine. Ag dul gudi on scoil, going to the school, but ag dul chun na scoile. So people like to use that in a stylistic way. It's quite nice. And it's not true. Mostly you will hear it used with an on, but you can also say ag dul chun páirce. For instance, on Éireann ag dul chun páirce, the team is taking the field. Dul chun ibre, going to work. And again, the article is not present there, but the nouns are changing to the genitive. So I hope that is helpful, James. So I don't know if we have any. Yeah, just to recap, chuig preferred when talking about going to an event. And then go and gudi when talking about going to a place. Ag dul gudi on Spáin. So gudi where the article is present, and go where the article is not present. And of course, if we use chun, we need to remember that the noun is going into the genitive or the genitive. So there we go. Anything to add there, Eoin? Pretty straightforward stuff. I don't know if you use chuig up in Limerick.
I'd say gudi. All right. I'm wondering to myself why the D word comes in when the article is there. When you laid out the example, it makes sense that that's when it's used. Yeah, I'm just curious about the D word. Yeah.
Yeah, I think honestly with things like that, sometimes there just isn't a reason.
Yeah.
But, well, if there isn't a reason, how does it develop? Yeah. The mind boggles.
I'll go back to a comment here. Someone asked about like learning approach. Is it okay to speak broken sentences? I I think maybe you have to.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what you
Absolutely.
think, Ben.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thinking back to my own situations again, I mean, you start with being able to say hello and goodbye in whatever language, so chuig agus Slán,
Mm-hmm.
and you go from there, and it's all about a challenge. So as soon as you put yourself in a position like that, you'll hear more Irish, in our case, then you'll be able to deal with. I think it's only natural,
Mm-hmm.
and so your answer won't be up to scratch either. So we're not saying aim for broken sentences, but I would argue that they're inevitable. Like it's the learning process. Like,
Yep.
what do you think, Ben?
I think when I see a toddler learn to walk without falling over, I'll start asking people not to use broken sentences when learning a language. I mean, it's just part of the process. That's the way it's going to be. That's how you learn. You know, you learn new words, whether it's passively or actively. You look for opportunities to include them in sentences, but as you're learning, you're not going to have every word that you need at your disposal. So broken sentences, yes. And if you can do that, and be aware of whatever deficiencies there are, be constructive about addressing them, and avoid using whatever your mother tongue happens to be to fill in the gaps, then you're making progress, and things happen gradually. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There's plenty of discussion coming in anyway. It's good to see. I don't know if we can address everything, but there was a good point there from Sean that go. I'm already putting myself in circles thinking about this, but Luan Gohina. Yeah, Luan Gohina, like that would be a general Monday to Friday. But if we're talking about, what do you think, Ben, like a more specific this week, on Luan Gadi Nahina, would that ever come into play? That you're talking about on Ina, Gadi on Ina.
Well, I think there's a distinction made between on-ina and day-hina when you're talking. If you're talking generally about what I do on a Friday, Erin-ina, Táim Gadín Picturlan, on a Friday I go to the cinema. And then if you're talking about what you're going to be doing this Friday, Be me dulgdi and Kilchern Dehina, but that's this one. On Erin-ina is generally, Dehina is this one, specific one. Maybe it was the past one, the next one. Luan Gahina, I don't think there's really any case for changing it. Generally, when we talk about Monday to Friday, we're talking about things that happen regularly or generally from Monday to Friday. If we're talking about a course that's running from Monday to Friday, on Luan Gadi, no, O De Luan Gadi Dehina is when it'll be happening, you know?
Yeah.
If we're talking about this week, na seachtaine seo, you know? So I don't really see what you're talking about arising, to be honest.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, so Luan
It's just Luan
Gahina
Gahina.
generally, or if it's this week or next week, De Luan Gadi Dehina. Na seachtaine seo chuin, no na seachtaine seo. That's what I think anyway.
That's my friend's catchphrase, all right. That's what I think anyway. But yeah, we'll just accept as well, like, won't we? Actually, a good answer is, that's a good question.
I'm actually looking for the question to see how it was phrased here. Okay, so go is also for Monday to Friday. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the answer is yes. Yeah, Oluan Gahina.
Keep it simple.
Mm.
It's all relative. Simplicity is relative.
Yeah, though of course, perhaps what Sean is saying is it's unina, and we're not saying gadi unina. We're just saying gahina,
Kahina.
which is interesting too.
It is. It's a good question. Yeah. This reminds me, Ben, just to throw it in, that you did a Q&A for members recently, and we're looking to do that more regularly, something like more of a Zoom call scenario instead of comments on YouTube. So the way we're looking at it is that we'll have some support at every plan at Bitesize Irish for members. So say on foundations that you'd have, excuse me, that's what we're trialing. So I can't make promises, but it's what I'd like to see for sure, that learners on every plan get a chance of a call with you or somebody else on the Bitesize team, to be able to ask this type of question, I guess, and maybe get pointers, and it's a bit more personal too. It's face to face, so it's something we're working out. But you're planning one for February anyway for foundations members, aren't you?
Yeah, even if people don't have specific issues, it's nice for them to feel that they're not on their own with the content.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that takes us. And it's nice to do. And the feedback was actually very positive, which is nice.
Yeah.
So there's just a ticker down at the bottom of the screen there if anybody wants to check out the memberships. I'll just have a question here from Inishmore, the Iron Islands, from Michelle. I just turned that off there now. Excuse me.
So I'll read out the question.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, thanks.
The question was, on screen, living in an Irish-speaking area, the Aran Islands, right, you said, for 13 years, and her husband speaks Irish. She tried conversational Irish classes, but didn't find them very helpful. And do you think I could memorize verb conjugation first and then add the rest?
Yeah, so this is very much a question of different strokes for different folks, because in teaching a language you encounter some people who would never consider sitting down and learning how to conjugate verbs, and then there are other people for whom that works quite nicely. Generally, what I recommend is a blended approach to learning, and happily Michelle is living in a place where Irish is all around her. And so it seems a shame to waste it. That says, she said that conversational Irish classes didn't help and weren't very helpful for her. So absolutely, Michelle, if sitting down and learning to conjugate verbs is something that you would consider and that you think would work for you, then absolutely go for it. But some of the most frequently occurring verbs in Irish are the irregular ones, and it may be easier to learn those through conversation and exposure. So I would suggest doing both, maybe giving it another go, and maybe don't go to classes, maybe learn to conjugate your verbs and join a club or join a society or do some voluntary work where you're meeting with people in different contexts if you have the time, so you're getting real world instances of these verbs. And especially if you're talking about a club or that sort of work, there'll probably be a context to that which will be recurring regularly. So if you're doing a walking club, if you're doing a book club, if you're doing a particular type of work, then you're going to be encountering these phrases and context-dependent sentences and verbs if you're doing it regularly. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it really seems a shame to waste the opportunity that you have where you're living. So maybe not conversational classes, maybe just everyday conversation plus your book learning. And if you can do that book learning, fair play to you. Go for it. Yeah.
Suppose I'd be wondering why the conversational classes didn't work. I know it can depend on a particular teacher if you don't click with them. It can feel, I guess, too simple, or maybe the other side of it is too difficult, and I can understand learners feeling like they're not good enough because they're not learning as fast as maybe other people around them seem to be learning. So there's a lot of kind of psychology involved there, which I find very interesting. Yeah, I like your advice there, Ben, about like adapting it to your strengths or your style. I know with verb conjugation, I was taking German lessons last year, and you know, looking at the baby steps that I made, it's, you know, the first person I in like 5 verbs. So when we're talking about conjugation, like you can look at a whole page of a verb conjugated, but what are the ones you're going to be using? There's going to be that 20% you might really come into contact with. Usually, you know, if you're expressing yourself, I'm talking about he, she, they, like that. So that's part of it. Yeah, the irregular verbs. You know, I hate the fact that there's exceptions like that myself, but what can you do? So personally, I like writing stuff out. So, you know, on little index cards, that works well for me. But I think kind of reading between the lines here, I might reduce expectations of myself, really. You know, I hear the Slovene language every day, and we're married for 15 years, so kind of similar context in a way, and there's still, you know, words that I hear 1,000 times and I don't know what they mean. I understand some of the words, and verb conjugation, for example. So I'm just trying to relate Michelle's context, yeah, and like her question of memorizing verb conjugation, maybe the little starting points, but don't stop there. Like make interesting sample sentences, you know, and you'll get very quickly into other things like lenition and the aru and séimhiú eclipsis. Yeah.
That's a really good point as well in terms of learning to conjugate verbs. You don't need to learn all the forms. Learn what you need. Me, you, he might be enough for starters. He, she, I should say. But yeah, it's pretty labor intensive stuff mentally. So a question here from John that you might have a perspective on. This is one that I've always found it difficult to relate to, really, because I grew up in the Gaeltacht and we didn't really learn Irish in a formal way that many people do, and it wasn't alien because it was just all the subjects were taught through Irish. But this is an old chestnut here. You got to it before me.
This one, yeah.
How could the Irish school system improve its Irish language program?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I'll come straight out with it. I think I'd be open to the default school system in Ireland being run through the Irish language by default. Primary school for sure. I don't know about secondary. Like you were saying, Ben, like my schooling was Oscuelga primary and secondary. So going into secondary, like that was interesting because there was like biology in Irish, learning French through Irish, but there was mixed things as well, like maths. Yeah, my kids go to the local Gael school, one of the Gael schools here in Limerick, where I'm based, and they're seeing a feedback loop now, a positive feedback loop. So some of the parents at the school, they went to the school and they've got, pretty good Irish, and their kids do better. The kids just soak it up even faster. When I went to a Gael school in the 80s, there wasn't that feedback loop there because it was a newly established school, So in that way, it's only getting better. So I don't want to be sucked into like complaining about the school system either. There's a lot of positives. I can see it every day. I can see my neighbours' kids growing up with very good Irish, and just by attending the school, and then there's some bits in the family as well, so they kind of get the message that, yeah, this is okay. I can speak this. I suppose there's other contexts where people are in an English language school. The Irish language has nothing in their mind to do with their everyday life, and I'll be the last to try to force Irish on somebody. So I don't know really. I suppose my suggestion of making every primary school a Gael school is kind of a forcing function, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. The Gael school as distinct from ordinary schools.
Yeah.
And so I don't know about improving Gael school, and I think they're probably pretty good as it is in terms of the Irish language. I do have a perspective on ordinary English language primary schools because we chose, for a variety of different reasons, to send our two children to a non-Gael school, primary school, which was very good, and I can't fault the school at all. But what I do think is deficient is the government's investment in Irish language training for teachers at primary level. So I think that if there was a longer education program for trainee teachers, where they got to be a lot more confident and comfortable with the language, then that would transfer to their teaching. What I think is happening is that people are training to be primary school teachers. Being a good Irish teacher is all they're concerned with is passing the entrance test and qualifying. A lot of them, not everybody now. And it's not faulting people personally, but I think that they're kind of coming out of their 2 or 3 years or whatever it is that they spend in college, or is it just 1 year after you have your primary degree, without a real confidence in their capacity to pass the language on, and that lack of confidence is passed on to the children. They pick up on it. It's not being taught in a confident way, and so that affects how the children view it, I think.
Let's be clear, like the level of Irish that a teacher might have could be very basic, as in it might be as basic in practical terms that they can't introduce themselves or make themselves be known, and then they're teaching Irish out of a book, right, for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you, the kids soak that up. So yeah, you're stuck with a system then where it's money, it's resources, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's time spent in the Gaeltacht,
Mm,
and it may be inconvenient, but I don't think that what is happening at present is sufficient in order for those people to be able to comfortably and confidently pass the language on. And as we've seen, simple things in language are not simple to explain or to teach. Yeah. So that's what I think.
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
There's a question there which relates to, we were talking about Zoom calls. So Miss Spock is saying, I only found you on YouTube. How do I find you on Zoom? So Owen, tell us.
Oh, well, I mean, the way it works is if you're a member, you get the info at Bitesize Irish. Because the idea is that we have a team. So let's especially talk about the Grow plan, because that's the all Gaeilge Gachala solution, where we have Emma, our community manager, who posts challenges every day in the private learners community. And then each week, Siobhan or Ben run the Bitesize Bio, which is the scripted conversation, and that's run on Zoom. So you post that up on Bitesize Bubble, and Grow members reply and say, "Yeah, I'll be there," and people show up, and they follow the members only link, and it's like that for a very good reason. Like we want to be able to help people who are invested. So yeah, I shouldn't try to justify it. It's a great service for our Grow members. And then in the last couple of months, we were asking ourselves on the team of how to help people who are on. So we have foundations and explore plans as well, which is more self-paced learning. And you might feel really stuck and on your own. So we have been experimenting with a Q&A, a live Q&A Zoom call for foundations members. So they get an email with the link. And then Explore members, what we're currently experimenting with is that we've got simple conversational scripts, maybe 3, that Explore members will get to test out every month. So it's a way to start practicing a little bit of conversation and ask questions as well. I'd say it's a bit of a Q&A session as well. And that's a Zoom link. So depending on what plan you're with Bitesize Irish, it depends how invested you want to be and how much you want to practice Gaeilge Gachala with us. So that's how to find us on Zoom. But we are here to help, and that's why we're on YouTube, to interact with the community and try to give good, friendly advice as we go as well. So there's both, there's YouTube and then there's Zoom for our members. And there's really kind of sense of community there, Ben, isn't there? Say on the Bitesize Bio calls, people get used to each other, don't they?
It's nice, yeah, and there's enough free time in the format for people to have a little chat as well when they're finished practicing their role play, and use whatever bits and pieces are new to them, or to use old things that they're familiar with new people as well. And of course, another aspect of it is that there is additional vocabulary relating to the theme of the conversation in each of those bio sessions as well as the grammar that we go through. So yeah, it's interesting, and often you go off on a little tangent, and people learn something unexpected. Well, often people learn something unexpected, and people get an opportunity to ask each other scripted questions that relate to the content of the conversation as well, which is nice. Yeah, so I think it's a great element. A question here, which is interesting as well, from Kaizen del Aguia. And this is part 2. Here's part 1. Would it be a good idea to study Gaeilge by reading native Gaelic or Gaeilge poems? And that's an interesting one. It would very much depend on the complexity of the poems. And of course, we know that poets are wont to use poetic license as well, which can confuse things. But one thing I would say, perhaps not so much with poems, but certainly with songs in Irish and Shownotes songs, is that they're a great way to learn the genitive clause. They're absolutely full of it. And if you learn a song, you will have numerous instances of the genitive that you can draw on as time goes by.
I suppose I would say I would alarm, like, a sound of alarm that you could really get stuck and maybe lose motivation if you're trying to study poems. And if it's any type of flowery language, could be very tough. But if you're that type of person, of course do it, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a good way to learn exclusively, but it's certainly a good thing to draw on. As long as you're careful. I suppose some of it depends on what period you're drawing from. Depends on period, dialect, editing, lots of things, because lots of things can go wrong with poetry. So, but it certainly could be interesting.
Like something that just comes to mind, there's kind of the tangent of that of children's poetry and stories like Gabriel Rosenstock. There's kids books, kids poems, but I suppose you're not really talking about that here, but I would be quicker to suggest that than full on poetry if I didn't know the person.
I think Tuairisc.ie does a pretty good job of explaining the poetry that's on the junior cycle curriculum, and they have recordings and text and explanations. So that might be worth having a look at. It's designed for secondary school students as a study aid, but if you're interested in learning from poems, that might be a good place to start. So that's it's an online news journal, so Tuairisc.ie. Just stick that in the banner, guys.
Okay.
I think Darrow Canada does a lot of the reading, so it's quite nice to listen to. So Tuairisc.ie, I think you'll find some poetry there explained.
Yeah. And J.W. Mulligan spoke about Siobhan's course on, it was song as a conduit to learning. So I hear of this from a lot of learners. Emails that come in, a lot of you out there connecting with the language. It's either through playing Irish music or listening to Irish music or Irish song. And I think learning through Irish song is very interesting, because there's a couple of aspects to it. Like there's a solid script. It's the lyrics in front of you, and you can practice, so you can get to know the Curfa chorus, and then expand your repertoire into the other verses. And indeed, you can probably enjoy it and even share it with people if you've really learned the song, you know. So yeah, we do have a Sing a Song in Irish course for Explore and Grow members, since they can access all our courses. And we've got in that course, it's a video course, 3 traditional songs, and Siobhan breaks it down. So she gives like the history of the song, introduces some words from the song, so you understand like the context, and you're learning a bit of Irish as you go. And then she teaches the song itself. So yeah, I'd really suggest that. It seems to be a natural way to learn, satisfying and fun as well. So if you've any connection, or if you're drawn to Irish music and song, I think that's a really good way to dive into Gaeilge a bit more. What do you think, Ben?
I do. I think it's a brilliant way to learn. I mentioned the genitive. That was always something that stuck out for me. But another thing about it is you will learn terminology that you don't necessarily hear, and vocabulary that you don't necessarily hear in everyday conversation or in the media generally. And that's not to say that those words are outdated or archaic. It's just that they may relate to a specific type of an aspect of the landscape or the terrain. They may be the word for a particular type of plant, a particular type of bird or animal, or for a particular type of emotion. I remember my mum telling me how she learned Culla Graphene, which is pins and needles, from a Shownotes song. You know, not necessarily going to hear that in speech, but Culla Graphene, pins and needles. So songs are full of these things, and you know, yes, Irish is in quite a healthy state at the moment, but it's not necessarily that rich in its daily use. And so these things are a great way to feed that vocabulary and terminology back in to everyday use. And yeah, I think they're a fantastic tool for learning. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, I suppose going on that tangent, but it is an interesting one, Ben. Like, with the minority language, there is that tension of the simplification of it and losing vocabulary and expressions. And then the tension because you have people who will always, introduce phrases and vocabulary that you probably know that the people you're speaking with don't have those words, or they might have been familiar with the words. So it's very different to the context of the English language, where there's so much exposure that like it's hard to come across a phrase or word any given day that you don't understand.
Yeah, well, it's another sort of element of trying to keep something alive, is maybe a kind of a crass way of saying, but keep something worthwhile, keep it rich. I mean, and it's kind of something that has to be addressed. And something interesting that happens in Ballinartairig, where I go back relatively frequently, where my mum lives, is a man named Tús McGarrett, who is a man who just has particularly rich Irish, and he has Oliver Nahina every Friday in the museum there, where basically he talks on a theme and just kind of people come and just write down what he's saying. He shares all of these old terms about whatever that theme happens to be. And the people who are showing up are not Irish learners. They're people who have fluent Irish from the area or who have moved. They've, pretty advanced level of Irish. But they're there because, if they don't write these things down, then they're gone, or you're going to have to, spend your half your life in the library digging them out of archives, So, my friend goes every week and he writes them down, and sometimes he passes them on to me, and it's a really valuable thing. So, on the one hand, we have Gaelscoil, and yes, people are speaking, and it's fantastic, and in a sense, language is spreading back out into the country. But the richness and the wealth of the language are important too, and it's nice to see that even within the Gaeltacht, that's being recognised, and people are making it their own personal effort to expose themselves to that and to record it, and not record it for some lofty reason, but to write it down and to try and to start to incorporate these things back into conversation and speech. And again, it's something that I've always tried to do as a journalist writing primarily about music. You need to find ways to describe modern concepts or modern phenomena using an older language. So sometimes that means using metaphor. It means maybe going backwards to try and find a new way to describe something. And in doing that, you can start to create new terminology or to bring words back in to use, which is nice.
Yeah, that's food for thought for me. Yeah, about there's a real there's a solid motivation for putting energy into learning the richness of the language and having that as like a process. I guess there's no end to that, so it's an ongoing endeavor. Yeah, no good thing.
Fáilte road, no bother. Just having a look to see if there's anything else to be addressed in the comments. Reading daily stories.
Thanks to everybody who's been chiming in the chat. It really is nice to see that connection with people.
And again, Niamh says reading stories in Irish is very important. Absolutely. Again, and if you have an interest in a particular dialect, then maybe choose a book from that dialect, but maybe choose a book from that dialect that's 100 years old. If you're into the Munster dialect, choose Fáilte and Fás, something like that, one of the Blasket books, and you'll pick things up, and they'll be relevant to the dialect that you're interested in. Connemara is not at all short of them. But that can be a nice way to do things as well. And even doing that is quite interesting because like some of the Blasket Irish was just a little bit different from what you get in the rest of Cork as well. Like sometimes it's quite funny.
Is it? Yeah. There was differences there, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we may have reached the end of the road here. Very nice to have all your comments. Gur míle maith agaibh. And again, if you go to Bitesize Irish, Eoin referred to the quiz at the beginning where to start with Irish, and there are a variety of other little bits and pieces, tasters. There's a free taster of Ashter there. Details of membership plans, secrets for practicing Irish every day, and other little useful bits and bobs. So yeah, gur míle maith agaibh to Eoin, and gur míle maith agaibh ar fad a bhí láthair a nocht. Thank you all. I'll be back next month with a different team, a different guest. Good son, Tuarara, agus Slán go fóill.
Gur maith agaibh, gur maith agaibh then.
Íomhá.